Hi, I'm Bob Kraus. I'm president of the Veterans National Recovery Center, and today we're going to talk about comic books that veterans like to read and perhaps like to write. And where we're going to start at Mike Miller's store, the Cosmic Capes Comics bookstore. And so we're going to look at pictures like this, which is Junkyard Joe. It's a Vietnam era comic, and another Vietnam era comic that's done by Dark Horse Comics. And we'll come right on inside and we'll talk to Mike and find out the straight poop about what's out there. Hi, I'm Bob Kraus, president of the National Recovery Center, Veterans National Recovery Center, and I'm with Mike Miller. And this is Mike Miller's comic book store. And he's got a lot of stuff. And if you remember the old newsprint days, the pulp comic books, they're different now, totally different. Hard covers, they got glossy print like a fine magazine on heavy stock. They come in plastic baggies. There is nothing like the corner drugstore that you once knew. And so we're going to talk about veterans and comics. And this is one they have. It's called Junkyard Joe. Mike, can you tell me a little bit about demand, what you have going on? We walked in this store and it was a madhouse. And so we had to wait for the dust to settle so we could do this video. But what's going on, especially, the comic books generally appear to be booming. What's going on with veterans comic books?
So we have a few comic books that are really what I would call war story kind of comic books. Mm-hmm. A couple of different publishers are putting them out, like the Junkyard Joe that you showed, mm-hmm. which is about actually both of these, the Apache delivery service as well, mm-hmm. which is done by Dark Horse. And they're both set in the Vietnam era in Vietnam. Junkyard Joe is about a well-established team, fire team that gets a new person added to them. Well, sort of person. Mm-hmm. It's an actual kind of like a robot, which mm-hmm. makes it a little bit fantastical because we don't even have those kind of robots now. But mm-hmm. but anyway, it's interesting because the robot is trying to learn how to interact, but in a very war setting, right? It's trying to figure out what's it supposed to do, and then they're very sort of distrustful of it at the beginning, and then the robot Junkyard Joe is the robot,
and he's one of the team at that.
Yeah, point. he really establishes mm-hmm. himself as part of the team. He saves some of the people, and things like that. So it really turns out, he's able to integrate himself.
So it's artificial intelligence in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Which we had a lot of stupid intelligence in those days, but we didn't have artificial intelligence.
Exactly.
So it's a different thing. And then likewise, this one is which we just talked about a little bit. It's an adventure story in four-part series about a young Navajo Indian who is a scout, and he goes into the jungles, and he runs into a soldier of fortune who's also a mass murderer, but they're hunting for a pile of gold that was hidden in the mines during some World War II adventure, mm-hmm. and they're going to get it and become rich. And it ends strangely, on a strange note, but they always do. Yeah. But now you compare that, and those are in this store. These are about the only two. There are no post 9/11. There's no Afghanistan. There's no Iraq. There's no Gulf War. There's no Panama invasion. There's no Grenada invasion. Mm-hmm. To date, obviously, there's nothing to go on with Ukraine. So you've got about a 50-year gap.
Yeah, actually, there was there's a graphic novel that was done just about a month ago mm-hmm. that was released, talking about mm-hmm. the war in Ukraine, and also to help raise money for the war efforts there. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of interesting. But generally, there aren't a lot of stories. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, there was a graphic novel version of the 9/11 report
Okay.
that was produced in an attempt to make it a little bit more easy to understand, right? It's because if you tried to pick up the 9/11 report and read it cover to cover, I mean, one, you'd fall asleep at some point, but two, it's very technical and complex, right? And if you're just trying to understand, the timeline and things.
So it was
So
a
there
comic
have
book.
been little
Yeah,
there
wow.
have been little bits and pieces, but generally right now real world based war stories haven't been very popular right now.
Yeah, I know back 10 years ago, when there were a lot of people coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and there was a lot of PTSD, and there wasn't very much help from the VA because they were becoming overwhelmed by it. But there were veteran art shops that or workshops where people would go in and they'd draw their hearts out to try to get the images that they saw that were causing the PTSD. And I always thought those would turn into some kind of a entrepreneurial comic book where they would draw these things together, but obviously it never happened. Nobody has veteran on their forehead when they walk in the door, so you can't really tell. But do you have people walking in and specifically asking for war or veteran comic books?
No, I not to date, but what I do have is there's one gentleman that comes in pretty much every week, and he's clearly a veteran. He wears his I think his Marine. He has a Marine cap with the board with all the different medals and things, right?
Yeah.
That usually is on the chest. So, and there's been a couple of others that have asked if I offer a veterans discount, which I do, and but generally, no, I haven't had people come in specifically asking for any kind of war or veterans sort of comic books. What I think. One of the reasons why I think maybe is because one, I run a very open store. You can wander wherever you want, find whatever you want, and only if you can't find it do they ask me about something. So that's fine. But also I think maybe I wonder if sometimes generally people that come in here are looking to sort of step away from reality. And comic books provides a really nice way to do that.
Oh yeah.
Even stories like this, like Junkyard Joe. I mean, yeah, it's based in Vietnam, which is a real place, and during the war, which is a real war, of course. But it's still got this fantastical bit with this super robot that turns out to save everybody's bacon, things like that. And I kind of doubt that there's a cache of gold hidden in Vietnam somewhere from World War II. So, so generally, even stories that are, and these aren't the only ones that are set in the real world. I've got plenty of comics that are sort of grounded in the real world, but they almost always have some sort of fantastical element to it. Something that makes you realize, okay, this isn't quite our world because our world doesn't have a robot that runs around saving people or anything else like that, right? So, or people flying through the sky.
But you've got a lot of Star Wars type adventure. There's a dinosaur poster over here with chasing a lovely young lady. There's fantasy things about a pretty young girl with a hatchet. There's it's and so that and it is fantasy.
Or women dressed in red flying a hoverboard and probably chasing Spider-Man.
Yeah, I guess you'd have to classify that as fantasy. So there's plenty of fantasy out there, and maybe the younger veterans are just diving into the forget-me fantasies, that don't relate to what they did. And that's what it is. But if you are a veteran of those ages and you like art, there may be an opening for you because nobody else is doing Afghanistan or Iraq comic books or anything like that.
Certainly not in the sort of mainstream publishing houses. Now, one area that I think would be really interesting to look to either see if others are doing it or that's a way to get into it is like places like Kickstarter, where they make there are a lot of creators that are just up and coming. You don't have, the money to do all the expensive artwork and have it printed and distributed and all that, but you can use those social media tools to raise money to do that. So if you've got a story, either, you're an artist or a writer or whatever, there are ways now that didn't exist before to get that story out and make it available to people. And in fact, I pick up a lot of comic books from those sources, and I have a special section where I put them on the wall because a lot of people don't look at Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or other places like that. But, so those are places where veterans or really anybody could, if they've got a story to tell that they think that there'd be an audience for, there are tools out there to help them do that.
Yeah, well, that's a great up note to end this on. That if you are out there and you're interested in this genre, there are stores just like this one all over America, and there is a comic book cult. In my days it was Archie and Goofy and Little Abner and who knows what else. But today it's a lot different, but there's a place in it for you if you're interested. And I think that we'll close on that note, and we'll walk just around the store a little bit, and we will just take some pictures of your racks, and you can tell me and Janelle here a little bit about your inventory. Is that okay?
Sounds great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Mike, what do we have here under DC Comics?
So yes, this is the DC room, and it was originally intended to be just DC Comics. However, it turned out that I bought way too many other publishers. So one of the walls is dedicated to other companies like IDW and Source Point and things like that. But yeah, most of this room is DC. This is where you'll find traditional things like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, etc. But DC is actually, they do have a title from Sergeant Rock, which was a World War II character, but they brought him back, and he's fighting the Army of the Dead. So if you're fans of Bruce Campbell and his movies, this is a story that Bruce is contributing to, where they're doing
Well, I'll have
crazy
to buy
stuff.
that one. I'll buy that one.
But actually, what's become really popular these days are some of the other stories that DC is putting out. So, for instance, yes, Batman is of course always popular, but some of the other characters, Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, etc., they've become quite popular too. And just recently, Tim Drake, which is the current Robin, well, one of the current Robins, has gotten a new story. It's the 30th anniversary this month of the death of Superman, so they've been putting out both some recreation, like some what they call facsimile, which are reprints of the original comic, as well as there it is, some new stories set at the time of the death of Superman. So a lot of different things, and DC's got a nice little horror section if people like horror or very weird supernatural stories. Like The Nice House on the Lake has been a huge story. It's if you like reading a story and saying what the heck is going on, that's a great story, because it makes you very interested in the characters, but you're slowly getting an idea of what's going on. Kind of like Lost for me back in the day when they slowly gave you little pieces that you could put it together. And then this hallway is a lot of other what I call indie, which really means non-DC or Marvel companies. So you've got Zenoscope, there's Opus, Whatnot, a big section here, Valiant, Boom, Boom is putting out a lot of comics. They've gotten very popular, especially with they have two. Of course, they've always had Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which is still ongoing. They're at issue 102 now. But one thing I want to point out is Boom puts out a comic book called Something is Killing the Children, about a woman monster hunter that goes around, and mostly she ends up getting the assignments of monsters that are going after kids. Well, so that became so popular that they created a spin-off called House of Slaughter, which is about the organization that this woman is a part of. So you start seeing other monster hunters and other stuff like that. But that, Boom has gotten really big. We also have companies like Aftershock, Scout, Vault, again putting out all sorts of different comic books. Each of these companies, they've done a really good job of not necessarily focusing on one thing. They're, so like they have this, which is about the government, have the '06 protocol about the government doing experiments on kids with drugs, and then what happens when they grow up and the government decides they have to clean up their mess. But they also have Fear of a Red Planet about colonization of Mars. You've got The Vineyard about this family that's owned a wine vineyard that they use magic and human sacrifice to keep going. So all sorts of interesting stories. We Live, which is more classic superhero kind of things. Dark Horse, of course, is a big company. They're the home of Stranger Things comics that go along with the TV show, but they also have a lot of Hellboy, a lot of, they've just started with some Star Wars comics, a lot of really neat stuff, and a lot of other companies, Ablaze and AWA, things like that. And then here's the Marvel room, and again, it's not a whole room of Marvel. You have a whole wall of Image comics, which is where you find Spawn, The Walking Dead, and that's where Junkyard Joe is published that we were talking about before. You've got a whole 2 walls of Marvel comics, Avengers, of course, Black Panther, Captain America, Daredevil, the Hulk, a whole two rows of Spider-Man and Spider-Man adjacent comics, 2 rows of Star Wars comics, a lot of stories, and because Disney owns Marvel, those are all considered part of the canon of Star Wars now, so you can, they're all being, and then 4 rows of X-Men and mutant related comic books. I remember when there was one comic book called Uncanny X-Men, but now there's a ton of them.
It took off.
And then there's this wall is primarily Dynamite, which does a lot of comics that are featuring strong women, usually, not always. We've got Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle over there, but a lot of strong women characters. Red Sonja, they do a lot of Red Sonja comics. Vampirella comics.
So the Red Sonja, that's not for the buyers are young women for that one. The strong woman ones, or it just goes everywhere?
Pretty much everywhere. They're a little bit more adult oriented, and not in terms of, they have like nudity or sex or anything like that. It's just you can tell the women tend to be a little bit less covered, let's say. So traditionally that's more of a man's thing, but the strong women characters are really fun. And it's one of and of course we were talking about Army of Darkness. Well, Dynamite also has been doing Army of Darkness comics for a while, and this one is a series about the Bruce Campbell character fighting against the Reanimator, which was another movie, or series of movies, I think. And then we have others like Titan and Black Mask. So a lot of different independent comics, as well as the big ones like Marvel and DC.
Yeah. Well, there's more. We could go on for another couple hours
yeah.
in here, Mike.
But the back here is all trade paperbacks, what a lot of people call graphic novels. But we also have cards, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, big books, which are, and then games, statues, Funko Pops, and then the one thing I wanted to point out, I mentioned before, I have a special section for Kickstarter and self-published. So here are a bunch of different comic books that I've picked up from Kickstarter or Indiegogo, or in some cases directly from the publisher, like Reign of Ages or 47 Furious Tales, and local publishers, or local artists, and writers. Like this one is a local creator. He comes in the store about once a month, but he had a webcomic that people liked enough that he went ahead and put it in a had it printed and bound, and they're fun stories too. This one in particular is about a mad scientist school, so sort of like a Harry Potter kind of school, but for mad scientists.
Yeah, well, this would be something for your art students.
A lot of fun stuff here.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mike, for this tour of your facility and your intricate knowledge of cartoons. When I was 12, I could probably put you on a run for your money, but no more. So I thank you for keeping up with it, and it's a real public service. The kids that we had that came in here right before, they were just so excited to be in here and see everything, and we really wish you well with your business. And Mike's store is in Saratoga Springs, New York. And so you can probably look it up on Google and find Mike's store. And stop over here, and if you're not close to Mike's, I'm sure there's another very nice store just like this near you. This is Bob Kraus with the Veterans National Recovery Center, wishing you a good day and great cartooning.